The weight of silence. Victoria Chen pressed her fingertips against her temples, fighting the exhaustion that threatened to pull her under as she sat at her desk on the 42nd floor of the building that bore her family's name. The city stretched out before her through floor-to-ceiling windows, a constellation of lights that seemed to mock her loneliness. At 34, she had everything the world told her to want: a billion-dollar tech empire, a penthouse apartment, magazine covers with her name in bold letters. Yet as she sat there at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, surrounded by the trappings of her success, Victoria felt the crushing weight of something she could never admit to anyone. She was tired. Not just physically tired, though the endless meetings and impossible decisions had worn her down to a thread. She was tired of being strong, tired of being invincible, tired of being the Victoria Chen that everyone needed her to be. And in all the years since, she had taken over her father's company. After his sudden death, not a single person had asked her if she was okay. That was when she noticed Maya Reeves still at her desk in the outer office, visible through the glass wall that separated them. Her assistant had been with her for 2 years now, a quiet presence who somehow managed to anticipate her needs before Victoria even voiced them. Maya was 28 with gentle eyes that seemed to carry their own burdens, and a way of moving through the world that suggested she understood what it meant to hurt. Victoria watched as Maya rubbed her own tired eyes, then returned to whatever task she was completing, her fingers flying across the keyboard with determined precision. Most assistants would have left hours ago. Most assistants did exactly what was required and nothing more. But Maya stayed night after night, working in silent solidarity with a boss who barely acknowledged her existence beyond the necessary professional exchanges. An idea formed in Victoria's mind, strange and impulsive. She wanted to know what Maya did when she thought no one was watching. She wanted to know if this young woman who had witnessed her at her worst, who had seen her snap at board members and work through lunch and sometimes stare out that window with hollow eyes, actually cared at all, or if it was just exceptionally good acting for a paycheck. The thought shamed her even as it took hold. But before she could talk herself out of it, Victoria stood up, walked to the leather sofa in her office, and arranged herself as though she had simply fallen asleep from exhaustion. She let her head rest against the armrest. Her body curled slightly, her breathing slow and steady. Through barely open eyelids, she could see the reflection in the window glass, could monitor the outer office without being detected. For several minutes, nothing happened. Maya continued working. The soft clicking of her keyboard, the only sound in the vast silence of the empty floor. Victoria's back began to ache from the awkward position, and she wondered if this was perhaps the most ridiculous thing she had ever done. Then she heard the footsteps, soft, hesitant footsteps approaching her office door. Maya appeared in the doorway, pausing there as though uncertain whether to enter. Victoria kept her breathing even, forcing herself to remain perfectly still. She watched through the reflection as Maya's expression shifted from professional concern to something much more complex, something that looked almost like pain. Maya moved closer, her steps careful and quiet, as though she were approaching something fragile that might break. She stopped beside the sofa, and Victoria could feel her presence there, could sense the warmth of another human being standing close after so many cold, isolated months. What happened next made Victoria's throat tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. Maya reached down not to wake her, but to carefully remove Victoria's shoes, placing them quietly on the floor. Then she disappeared for a moment, returning with Victoria's cashmere coat from the closet. With movements so tender they made Victoria want to weep, Maya draped the coat over her like a blanket, tucking it gently around her shoulders. But Maya didn't leave. Instead, she knelt down beside the sofa, and Victoria heard her voice for the first time speaking, words that weren't filtered through professional distance. The words were soft, barely above a whisper, and they were addressed to someone Maya believed was unconscious and unhearing. "You work so hard," Maya said, and her voice carried a sadness that pierced through Victoria's carefully constructed armor. "You carry so much and everyone just keeps demanding more, and no one ever asks if you need anything at all. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you, not as some untouchable CEO, but as a person who deserves kindness and rest and someone to tell her that she's doing enough, that she's been enough all along." Victoria's heart hammered in her chest, and she had to concentrate with every fiber of her being not to react, not to open her eyes, not to reach up and grab Maya's hand. She felt something warm on her cheek and realized with shock that a tear had escaped, sliding down her face despite her efforts at control. She thought Maya would notice, thought the charade would end there, but Maya simply reached out with the lightest touch and wiped the tear away with her thumb, a gesture so intimate and compassionate that Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest. Some wall she had built that had been keeping everything out, but had also been keeping her trapped inside. "I know you won't hear this," Maya continued, her voice breaking slightly, "but I think you're incredible. Not because of the company or the money or any of that. Because I see how you fight. Every day against people who underestimate you because you're a woman in a man's world. I see how you remember the names of every person in this building, from the executives to the cleaning staff. I see how you donated half your salary last year to charity and thought no one would notice. I notice everything about you, Victoria, and I just wish someone was taking care of you the way you take care of everyone else." The words hung in the air between them, filling the office with a truth that Victoria had never allowed herself to acknowledge. Maya stayed there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the sofa, as though she were keeping watch. Finally, she stood up, and Victoria heard her whisper one last thing: "Rest well. You deserve peace, even if it's only for a moment." Then Maya returned to her desk, and Victoria heard the sounds of her gathering her things, the soft click of the lights being turned off in the outer office, and finally the distant ding of the elevator doors closing. Only then did Victoria allow herself to move. She sat up slowly, the coat falling away, and pressed her hands against her face as the tears came in earnest now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. In that moment she understood something profound. She had spent years believing that strength meant standing alone, that vulnerability was weakness, that needing someone was the same as failing. She had built empire after empire, proved herself again and again, and had become so focused on being untouchable that she had forgotten what it felt like to be touched. Maya had seen through all of it. Maya had seen her. The next morning, Victoria arrived at the office early, her heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and something that felt dangerously close to hope. She had spent the entire night thinking about what to do, how to address what had happened, without revealing that she had been awake the whole time. But when Maya arrived, settling into her desk with her usual quiet efficiency, Victoria found herself walking out of her office and standing in front of Maya's desk before she could overthink it. Maya looked up, surprise flickering across her features at this break in their routine. Victoria opened her mouth to speak, found no words adequate, and then did something she hadn't done in years. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. "Thank you," Victoria said simply, and Maya's eyes widened in confusion. "For last night, for the coat, for staying." Maya's face went pale, then flushed deep red, clearly mortified at being caught in her moment of tenderness. "I'm sorry, I should have just woken you. I didn't mean to overstep," Maya stammered. But Victoria held up a hand to stop her. "You didn't overstep," Victoria said, and her voice was gentler than Maya had ever heard it. "You did exactly what I needed, even though I didn't know I needed it. You saw me, not the CEO, not the persona, but me. And I realize now that you've been seeing me all along, and I've been too blind and too scared to see you back." Maya's eyes filled with tears, and Victoria felt her own throat tighten again. "I heard what you said," Victoria continued, the confession spilling out before she could stop it. "I wasn't asleep. I was pretending because I wanted to know if anyone actually cared, and you do, and I don't know what to do with that, except to tell you that I care too. I've cared for a long time, but I didn't know how to be both your boss and someone who wants to know you as more than just the person who manages my schedule." The office fell silent except for the ambient sounds of the city waking up around them. Maya stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly, and Victoria saw in her face the same fear and hope that she felt churning in her own chest. "What are you saying?" Maya asked quietly, and Victoria took a breath that felt like the first real breath she had taken in years. "I'm saying that I'm tired of being alone in a crowded room. I'm saying that somewhere along the way, you became the only person I look forward to seeing every day. I'm saying that I want to know if there's a possibility that you feel even a fraction of what I felt hearing you speak to me last night." believing I was asleep and vulnerable and finally human. Maya stepped around her desk, closing the distance between them until they stood face to face, and Victoria could see every emotion playing across Maya's features. The fear of professional consequences, the hope that this might be real, the naked vulnerability of admitting feelings that she had clearly been guarding for a long time. "I've been in love with you for 18 months, Maya said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "But I never said anything because I thought you were untouchable, unreachable, existing in some stratosphere I could never access. Last night, seeing you asleep on that couch, you just looked like someone who needed someone, and I wanted so desperately to be that someone for you." Victoria reached out then, a gesture she had denied herself for so long, and took Maya's hand in hers. Their fingers intertwined, and Victoria felt the simple warmth of human connection flow through her like electricity. "I'm not untouchable," Victoria whispered. "I'm just someone who forgot how to let people in. But you found a way in anyway, and now I don't want you to leave." Maya smiled through her tears, and it was the most beautiful thing Victoria had ever seen. They stood there in the quiet office, hands clasped, two people who had been orbiting around each other in professional distance finally allowing themselves to collide. Victoria knew that the road ahead would be complicated, that there would be questions about workplace relationships and power dynamics and 1,000 other concerns that would need to be addressed. But in that moment, with Maya's hand in hers and the morning sun streaming through the windows, illuminating the city that had witnessed her loneliness for so long, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt hope. She felt seen. She felt for the first time since her father had died and left her with an empire she never asked for, that maybe she didn't have to carry everything alone. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt alone in a crowded room or yearned for someone to see the real you beneath the mask you show the world, I ask you from the bottom of my heart to take a moment to like this video, to share it with someone who might need this reminder that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that love often finds us in the moments when we finally stop pretending to be invincible. Your support means everything, and helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most. The months that followed were not easy, but they were real in a way that Victoria's life had not been real for a very long time. She and Maya navigated the complexity of their relationship with careful attention to both their feelings and their professional responsibilities. They established clear boundaries at work, hired an additional assistant to ensure there was no appearance of favoritism, and were transparent with the company's board about their relationship. Some people whispered, some people judged, but Victoria discovered that when you've spent years building armor against the world's opinions, it becomes remarkably easy to disregard them when you've finally found something worth protecting. Maya taught Victoria how to be soft again, how to admit when she was struggling, how to ask for help without seeing it as failure. Victoria taught Maya that strength and tenderness weren't opposites but partners, that you could be powerful and vulnerable at the same time, that love wasn't about completing each other but about choosing each other every day, even when it was difficult. They learned together that the most profound act of courage isn't standing alone against the world, but opening your heart to someone and trusting them not to break it. Before we reach the end of this story, I want to ask you something. If you believe in the power of love to heal, in the strength it takes to be vulnerable, and in the beauty of two souls finding each other in the chaos of life, would you take a moment to leave a comment below telling me about a time when someone saw the real you, or when you saw someone else for who they truly were beneath their masks? Your stories matter, and sharing them creates a community of people who understand that we're all fighting battles no one knows about, and we all deserve to be seen. On a quiet evening, 6 months after that transformative morning, Victoria stood at the window of her office once more, but this time she wasn't alone. Maya stood beside her, their shoulders touching, their hands intertwined, watching the city lights come alive as darkness fell. Victoria had learned that the view was more beautiful when you had someone to share it with, that success meant nothing without connection, that vulnerability was not the opposite of strength but its foundation. She had also learned that sometimes the person you need most is standing right beside you, quietly witnessing your struggles, waiting for the moment when you finally trust them enough to stop faking sleep, and wake up to the possibility of being truly, completely, beautifully seen. And in that moment, with Maya's hand in hers and the weight of loneliness finally lifted from her shoulders, Victoria Chen felt something she had not felt in years. She felt breathless. Not from exhaustion or anxiety or the crushing pressure of responsibility, but from the overwhelming gratitude of knowing that she was no longer alone. Love had found her in the last place she expected, in the quiet dedication of someone who had been seeing her all along, waiting patiently for Victoria to see herself reflected in Maya's eyes and finally understand that she was worthy of the very tenderness she had been denying herself for so long. That realization, more than any business success or professional achievement, was the thing that truly transformed her life and taught her the most important lesson of all, that being seen, truly seen, by another human being is perhaps the greatest gift we can ever receive, and the bravest thing we can ever do is allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to receive it.